Hello, scrufftards, boys and girls, degenerates, basement dwellers, and internet weirdos. Welcome to the Warzone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And we're gonna take a look at a Ukrainian breakthrough, uh, maybe exploiting weak Russian positions. Is it a breakthrough? I don't know. It has the potential of becoming one, but since it has that potential, I'm thinking Russia will close it down uh, rather quickly. But there is potential, and because of it, I think Russia will deal with it. That said, though, Ukraine has successes all across the front line, pushing Russia back all over the place. So, an interesting couple of days this weekend for sure for the Ukrainians. So, let's take a look. Okay, so we're going to be using Mayakovsk 73's map to highlight various locations along the front line. So we're going to begin in the north with Kursk and Sumy. Zooming in, we can see Russian airstrikes or artillery strikes at Besalivka. That's encouraging. We had a Russian flag here a couple of days ago, a week ago, indicating that Russia had pushed across the border and taken Besalivka. This town is very important because it allows Ukraine to move through cover all the way up to the border and then follow cover, as you can see, via windbreaks into Russia itself. Russia has made a counter move here, and eventually they managed to push in and contest and raise a flag in Besalivka. Now Russia is shelling Besalivka, indicating Ukraine has made a counter move here. Very crucial. We can zoom into Sumy Oblast. We can see Ukraine keeps pushing Russia back ever so slightly here and there. Grinding the Russians down and advancing ever so slightly. Russia appears to be abandoning Sumy according to rumors and according to sources. Siversk said that they have essentially lost the battle, having pulled out their elite units from the area, which should indicate that Ukraine will keep advancing in Sumy Oblast. Also, if you see maps talking about Ukraine raising flags, they are on top of masts here within Kursk, so they've put up flags with drones around Guevo. So if you see in the maps highlighting that, just remember those flags have been placed by drones and not troops on the ground. What else interesting? Yeah, we're gonna jump over to here you have those flags you can see here, right? Drone by drone says here on Andrew's map. Interesting to show you down here. Take a look. A lot of Ukrainian drone strikes along this highway here. And the reason is this is the main supply line leading into the territory north of Kharkiv. We talked about this ages ago. Ukraine at one point actually pushed into Suravlyovka, contested the town, moved up and disrupted logistics along the main highway here that goes through town. And that is when Ukraine managed to push up this way, up on top of the hill, took this valley and began making moves on Hlubokia. They also advanced north here along the shore here of the big dam. And that was when they moved in and disrupted the logistics coming in here through this highway here. Now, instead of sending in troops, they seem to be relying a lot of drone, probably done the drone attacks all along, but now we're seeing it on a map indicating Ukraine is very much attempting to take out the logistics that flows through Suravlyovka from within Russia to reach the Kharkiv front line. Pickup truck destroyed, more than likely a drone team getting hit here by the Russians within Ukraine. I mean, judging by all the recent drone strikes. So that's what's happening here. Ukraine is going after logistics. Maybe this is enough to allow another move north of Kharkiv here. Jumping back to Mayakovsk 73. we now have an indication that, as you can see here, Kupiansk, Russia has begun to push in from the north. Some indications that Russia's come down to the west of Kupiansk, trying to reach the main highway here to cut logistics. Unknown if they've been successful in doing that. But we have Russians operating here, at least directly west, not as far south as the main highway. They might have infiltration units down here, taking out the odd logistic trucks moving through, but it's not severed. If they have troops, they're disrupting logistics, not cutting them. But at any rate, Ukrainian drone strikes within town, within the outskirts, and like we said, if Russia managed to push through Holubivka and secure Radkivka, which they now have done, Radkivka would become the forward base of operations, combined with this factory here, and allowing Russia to build up forces in the woods, and then they would begin pushing south. So if you follow my videos, you should not be surprised that this is happening. We'll see if Ukraine has the manpower to withstand the assault. We know Russia pushed in here to draw, like we talked about as well, if you've been watching my videos, this push would draw attention, draw resources from Vovchansk, from Kupiansk, to secure this push. And just days after this push, Russia made advances at Vovchansk, and they began pushing south towards Kupiansk. So this push seems to have had the intended effect for the Russians. It has opened up options for them at Vovchansk, and now they're pushing south towards Kupiansk and trying to make their way into town. We know that Ukraine has moved up and engaged Russians at point-blank range at some of these buildings. Ukraine took 1 or 2 casualties, unknown if dead or wounded, and then drones flew in and blew up the buildings where the Russians were hiding. So successful reconnaissance mission that allowed drones to go in for the kill. Enough to stop the incursion. Is it a bigger push to establish a presence, or just seeing how deep you can go? Where are Ukrainian lines? Where are the strong points? What's the response time for drones and what have you? There's a fair bit of mapping going into it before you just go in for the all-out assault. And the units in Kupiansk, they've seen what happens down in Pokrovsk, so maybe they are prepared for these infiltration units trying to sneak in, more prepared than the guys down at Pokrovsk, at least. We'll see. This might be a big push. This might just be Russia trying to find their way through to spot strong points and what have you. But it's underway in some form or fashion at Kupiansk. Ukraine advancing here in, should we call it the Lyman direction, maybe? Where the hell is Lyman? It should be here somewhere. Am I blind? Here's Lyman, right here. So it's north of Lyman, to be perfectly fair. Okay, we're gonna call it Lyman anyway. So Ukraine has had some success of late. At the Ridkodub, they pushed in. They've pushed into Novomykhailivka, and even made some moves at Rakivka. So 3 perfectly fine counterattacks along the northern flank. Very encouraging, to be perfectly honest. We usually just see 1 counterattack, and then the Russians eventually push the Ukrainians back. But here we have 3 in relative short time at Ridkodub. What a word, Ridkodub. Say that 5 times fast. Ridkodub, Novomykhailivka, and Rakivka. We'll see if this is something larger at work, or if it's just a counter push to stall the Russian advance for a week or maybe a month, and then it's back on track. We'll see what happens, but encouraging nonetheless. At Siversk, Russia just keeps running into that wall. I'm going to show you here with Andrew. Take a look at this. Taking ground here, they made a push down here towards the river, isolating the Ukrainians. Not surprising that Ukraine fell back from this pocket. They were in real trouble. And as they were falling back, I'm guessing the Russians exploited that fact and took some more territory as the Ukrainians were falling back. Seems very likely. But here you can see, the Russians are trying to reach Siversk, and they just keep hitting this wall. It's a really slow advance along this front line. And I wonder how many Russians have died trying to reach Siversk. It is a slaughter, to be fair, to be perfectly honest. Russia has this push happened is it a week ago when pushing out of Chasiv Yar. Taking these windbreaks, haven't they reached this far? I'm not sure. I guess they have, if it's indicated that they are this far. But it's stalled out this push a bit, so I guess they found a gap and managed to get through. And now Ukraine has managed to lock it down, for now at least. If Russia can follow up this move, then we might actually see the front lines moving a bit faster. But if Ukraine has moved in assets to tie it down, then Russia might be back at square one. When you have these pushes, you need to an instant follow-up move. You need to exploit the push. Otherwise, it's just, we took a kilometer and then we're back on sitting on our asses for 5 months before we take another kilometer. You really need a quick follow-up move. So, we broke through, they're running, let's punch through again and keep that momentum going, like we saw up here, right? So, came down this way. These guys had to fall back, and as they're falling back, you follow that move up by taking more territory. So you need to follow up the initial success, and the Russians seems to be struggling with it here at Chasiv Yar, fortunately for the Ukrainians. Toretsk, it's slow going. It's really slow going. And zooming in here, they haven't even taken the big mining facility on the hill here. Still bombing it, as you can see. Trying to move around here on the flanks, bombing the rear of the line here, or of the area behind that fortification, the factory, like crazy. But, barely any advance. They've pushed out a Delivka here. And how long has this taken them? 6 months or something, taking a few kilometers here and there. Insanity. Question is, should or will Ukraine hold on to this territory here, knowing that Russia is so close to cutting them off? If Russia can break through here, it's going to be difficult to get all of these Ukrainians out of the area. They would need to cross this big lake, this dam. So maybe Ukraine should abandon these positions and just fall back and begin defending Pleshivka. What do I know? So we're gonna be returning to this area soon enough. Don't worry, we'll take this at the end. What else? Still no updates on Toretsk. We know Ukraine launched a mechanized assault with Bradleys and M113s, pushed the Russians back, reached this far, and also began contesting Horikove. Russia has been shelling here with artillery for 2 or 3 days after that assault. But as you can see, I don't think any map has any further updates on the Ukrainians reaching in here towards Troitsk. So yeah, unknown what happened. It's contested, the area. Should indicate that Ukrainians have troops in the area and that they're trying to push in more units. We'll see how that plays out. But to the west, take a look. Ukraine has liberated Seleny High and pushed all the way into Tolstoy. This is a roughly 8-kilometer push by the Ukrainians. And Russia was contesting this town, and then Ukraine made a counter move, and the day after that counter move continued all the way to Tolstoy and Seleny High. So a nice advance by the Ukrainians here, an important counter move. And also over here along the road here up to Zaporizhzhia, we can see that Russia has secured Kamyansk, coming up along the coast here, the shore rather, towards Plavny. You can see Ukrainian attacks all the way up here. There has been some fighting over the football pitch. What is this? Is this a residential area, a school? I don't know. But a lot of fighting has been ongoing here in this area with these buildings. Not surprisingly, I mean, they're high-rise buildings. They overlook the surrounding area more than likely. And it's a fortress that defends the approach to Stepnohirsk. Russia's tried to push in, Ukraine has counterattacked. But the Russians, they seem to be coming up the flank. They've been trying this for some time. Ukraine has been counterattacking. Now the Russians are pushing through. More than likely have secured Plavny if they can launch attacks all the way up here. So Stepnohirsk might be outflanked in the coming weeks if Russia can make access to these suburbs here. To come in from the west rather from the south to take Stepnohirsk. But now we're gonna return to Pokrovsk, because obviously that is where all the fun stuff is happening. Fun stuff, it's war, it's horrible, but the interesting stuff concerning changes on the map. And I mean, we've seen Ukraine taking some ground here and there, up in Sumy, over here at Lyman, Lyman, yeah. And down here southwest of Pokrovsk. So it's not a one-sided event here with Russia only pushing like we see at Kupansk, for instance, and over here at Siversk. No, it's give and take in the last week, and the Ukrainians are stepping up. And of course the focal point is Pokrovsk for all of this that is going on. So first off, we're gonna take this is a video from 9th of April. Russia had not begun the move yet, but I was talking about this, I mean, 8 to 10 months ago. I was making videos about this, but how Russia would move up to the south and west and come up to the east and north. But the reason why this push, you can see here I've highlighted that they're going to be heading straight for Chakova, right? The reason is, and we're now going to take a look at the breakthrough operation, and we need to keep this in mind. Russia has moved into Kotlin and Udachne. They are now in Udachne. Udachne is being hit by Ukrainian drones like crazy, so Russia is in Udachne proper. And they're holding Kotlin and Udachne by looks of it. So they've taken these two supply lines. This one is firmly in their control now, since they pushed out here to the river and what have you, or close to river at least, or they're at the river, aren't they? So this supply line is well and truly in their control at this point. So they've cut these supply lines, and they now want to try and come in north, right? We've seen they're trying to come in north. And remember now that they're down here when we take a look at the next map. This is not included in the next map, but it's just south of the next map that we're going to take a look at. And this is the map in question, where you have the larger, grander breakthrough operation highlighted. And remember, just south of the edge here, you have Rodynsk and Udachne, where the Russians have moved up and cut 2 supply lines. And just going north a bit, you end up with the E50 highway leading into Pokrovsk. And north of Pokrovsk, you had this big breakthrough operation. And as you can see, the main purpose of it was to improve the situation for the Russians at Chakove, enter Rodinske, and cutting the 2 supply lines closest to the Russian positions. So they wanted to enter Rodinske and then wanted to punch through north of Rodinske to cut the supply lines and get into positions to threaten Rodinske from the north. They also tried to come into the south here to cut the supplies and threaten Rodinske. And you saw a lot of artillery strikes, a lot of airstrikes aimed at Rodinske. This was a big push with intent to take Rodinske, or at least enter Rodinske, and cutting this supply line coming in from the north into Pokrovsk. And at Chakove, the main purpose was to come up west of Chakove. There's a river here, making an assault from the east difficult. So they needed to expand the front line west of Chakove, took some high ground and some valleys, and now they can threaten Chakove properly. And in so doing, they also cut the supply line coming out of Chakove. So this was the main objectives of this breakthrough, quote-unquote, operation. Cutting supply lines closest to the action, improving the situation for the Russians at Chakove, setting things up for an eventual assault, and big push at Rodinske in an attempt to enter and possibly secure Rodinske. There were some secondary objectives, and that was reaching the supply lines furthest away from the action, here at Novo Alexandrivka, and of course the supply line coming in through towards Dobropelia behind the Siversk line. So Russia has tried to push through with smaller sabotage units, ambush units, to disrupt logistics along these rear logistical lines, not cutting them. They did not have the manpower to do so, but to disrupt these logistical lines, cut the supplies closest to the action, disrupt the supply lines furthest away from the action. There was also additional objectives of, if possible, infiltrate and take ground in the Siversk line and hold territory between this supply line and this supply line. But the main purpose was to improve the situation at Chakove. Anything north was a bonus if Russia achieved anything to the north of it. So this was the grander operation at work. And take a look. I mean, remember where the Russians are south of this image? Had this been successful, now the Ukrainians managed to punch through here and cut the Russians off. They managed to reclaim these defensive lines here along a railway. So the Russians to the west here are essentially cut off. But had the Russians successfully punched through here and held territory, surrounded Rodinske, and kept flooding this area here with smaller sabotage units, Jaeger-style units that would sneak their way through to disrupt the logistics coming in here, what would that have left the Ukrainians with? One supply line along the E50 into Pokrovsk. Because everything south of this supply line is cut. Had the Russians managed to push through here, everything north would have been cut. Pokrovsk would have had one supply line. And then Pokrovsk and Mirnorod would have been in serious, serious trouble. Like you wouldn't believe. So everyone's focusing up on this push, totally ignoring the significance of this attempt and the importance of Ukraine being able to reclaim the railroad here and cutting these Russians off. I don't know why. It's just mind-boggling that the focus is up here when this was so important. And you see reports of Russia losing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of troops. I'm thinking most of those guys were actually killed down here as the Ukrainians pushed in to cut the Russians off and maybe you had cleanup operations behind this defensive line, this railway, in this red area marked here. And I'm thinking this is where Russia lost a lot of troops as the Ukrainians went in hard to deny the Russians a chance to secure Rodinsk and reaching and cutting the supply lines here at Novoalexandrivka. But yeah, so that was the breakthrough operation. Intent to improve the situation for the Russians at Chakova. Intention was to take Rodinsk and cutting the supply lines closest to the action, and then sneaking their way through and disrupting the supply lines the furthest away, and maybe, if a possible, hold territory further north here in order to slow down Ukrainian counter moves at Chakova. Right, so that was the breakthrough operation at large. Everyone's focusing on this bit, completely forgetting about this bit. I don't know why, but we should expect the Russians to still have the odd team operating up here in the Siversk line. Maybe we will see sporadic, the occasional ambush on logistics coming down here. I fully expect that to happen. Most of the Russians seems to have fallen back from the Siversk line to Chasiv Yar and the surrounding area. We've seen Ukrainian airstrikes up here, drone strikes in the middle here. So this has become an Alamo situation. The Russians have fallen back, hold up. The Ukrainians have come in south and cut them off. Not that surprising. I mean, not that many positions that the Russians could have held. So if the Ukrainians made a big push, as you can see, there are just a couple of windbreaks that the Russians could have held and defended. And if they only moved up with infantry and light-skinned vehicles, and all of a sudden you have infantry fighting vehicles, combat vehicles showing up, it's going to be a one-sided event. So I think that explains why the Ukrainians managed to successfully cut the Russians here in the midsection. Interestingly, though, Russians are holding the hills here with the valleys, which is what is important. Russia is more than likely moving in troops to fortify. They are hammering the Counterattacks here with artillery to prevent the Ukrainians from pushing in from the west, and defending their western flank with an artillery screen, as it were. And what they're doing is building up forces to come down these valleys towards Chakova. They're coming up to the east. We've seen Russia advancing here steadily. Seems most mappers agrees that this might be contested or under Russian control. So they're coming up this valley as well. By the looks of it, might be down here also, closing in on Volodymyrivka, south of Chakova. Was a push here into Pankivka by the Russians. But there is one issue though. If you take a look here up on the hill, lots of Ukrainian trenches overlooking this approach. So if the Russians want to keep pushing here, they need to somehow push through here and storm these trenches. If they can do that and take the high ground here, this hill, then they can obviously assist a push along the road here with some overwatch positions coming up and threatening Volodymyrivka from the west and being in a position to launch assaults on Chakova from the south. So most YouTubers, they're going to focus on this. This is going to be what they're focusing on, this Alamo situation. If Ukraine can move in and take here, you're going to hear no end to it. But this is a distraction. Ukrainians will be focusing on taking Chasiv Yar while Russia is fortifying down here, and Ukraine won't be able to punch into this area, I'm afraid, if they need to focus on mopping up Chasiv Yar. And that means Russia can defend this area and they can eventually launch an assault on Chakova. If Ukraine can't begin operating here, I am worried for Chakova. I really am. So the north, while this push may have been a failure, if Ukraine managed to push down here, secured the north of Rodinsk, we still have Russians in Rodinsk, as I understand it. But if Ukraine has managed to mop up Russians here, behind this railway. I'm thinking this was basically a failure for the Russians, even though they did manage to push into Rodinsky, but without the northern support, chances are the Russians have to struggle to push further into Rodinsky. Here in the north, it was a success. Russia took the ground they needed to take to threaten Charkov. They're coming in from the east, coming in from the south. They've begun operations here in the west. It's only a matter of time before Charkov eventually falls. Month, 2 months, who knows? But Russia is in a position to threaten and take Charkov. And Chasiv Yar is going to be a distraction, and the Ukrainians will not be able to prevent Charkov from falling unless they begin operating here. But on that note, things have obviously happened that might hopefully change the situation if the Ukrainians can exploit it. And that is, of course, when we move south and the push to Myrne. And if we take a look at the maps, the push seems to have happened between these two lakes, through this small village of Mykolaiivka and the town of Myrolyubivka. We have Mykolaiivka up here, Mykolaiivka down here. So the push seems to have happened at Mykolaiivka, not Mykolaiivka. Between these lakes, Ukraine appears to have pushed up through here. You see wide open spaces, which should suggest that Ukraine had to move through this larger town in order to come across here and move through cover. We know Russians have shelled this part of the battlefield. Not strange, since wide open fields, and this is the only way you can advance through cover to reach Myrne. And I saw a post where the Russians were complaining they were holding Myrne with 2 or 5 guys when the Ukrainians arrived, and there was just no way of holding Myrne. So the real breakthrough was down here, where the Russians had, for some reason, not enough troops to hold the Ukrainian assault, and then Ukrainians reached Myrne and there were no Russians here, and they got overwhelmed and taken prisoner, POWs. We have rumors that Ukraine has also entered Malinivka, the outskirts. Wouldn't surprise me if that means Ukraine is operating here and here to the west of town, taking Myrne and outskirts of Malinivka. And this could potentially have some serious ramifications for the Russians, which makes me think Russia will launch a big assault at Myrne. They might take troops from Poltavka and here's the southern edge here, which might slow down the advance on Charkov from the east. So troops might be taken from over here to deal with Myrne, maybe even from down here, Rodivka, to be moved up to assault into the town here, maybe, to deal with it. Because if Russia does not deal with Myrne and Myrolyubivka, and Ukraine establishes a presence, and being somewhat behind Russian lines here with having come through here, Ukraine has the potential to properly exploit this and cause real trouble for the Russians. Because this is the image I posted on the community post and over at the Discord. There is some hopium with Myrne, the Myrne situation, which is why I think Russia will just sending everything they have to deal with it to prevent anything from happening. But the hopium is that if you move in enough troops into this gap that they've created, they can, initially at least, threaten Novoekonomice. Because Russia has basically only one road leading into Novoekonomice at this point. And that comes from Razina following the river south. And you can see Ukraine has troops really close to the river. Close enough to threaten and disrupt this supply line. And they are in Myrne, so this supply line is cut. The Russians in Novoekonomice, they have some issues. and are potentially surrounded and isolated if Ukraine can fortify Myrne and exploit it and pushing west closer to Novoekonomic even, and maybe throwing in troops this way to cut that last supply line. Novoekonomic is in trouble with Ukraine in Myrne. And there is also the potential of Ukraine coming up north from Myrne towards Razine. And this is where Russia is crossing the river to moving troops across to reach Boykivka and what have you, and coming up north here. There are some more bridges, more than likely. But still, Razine is where the Russians came across to begin with, and began getting troops across to push north and also west towards Rudinsky. So if Ukraine can come up here and cut off Razine, that makes Russian operations further north at Shakove and west at Rudinsky all the more difficult. And Razine and Novoekonomic are within reach of Myrne. It's only a couple of kilometers, 4 kilometers to Razine or something like that. So if Ukraine can move in troops here and exploit this, Russia has trouble. They have a lot of trouble, and that is why I think Russians are going to move troops to deal with it. And if you really want to sniff the opium dust, it's 9 kilometers from Myrne to Ukraine's southern positions up here. So if Ukraine can push north 2 or 3 kilometers, all of a sudden there's a real potential of closing this gap and cutting the Russians off completely over here by the river. Because if you move north a kilometer or two, Russia doesn't have all that many options in moving units and logistics through the area to support them. Right? It's just wide open fields where they are prime targets for drones. So Myrne, it's an important push, and if you really want to sniff the opium, Ukraine could potentially make something massive out of it. I'm willing to, I'm gonna not go off the rails, and I'm gonna assume Russia deals with Myrne, so this here doesn't snowball out of control and actually comes into fruition, right? Another fun note, Myrne is 6 kilometers away from this massive intersection here. Remember, this is where Russia was 6 months ago when they began the push north towards Shakove. And now Ukraine is all of a sudden 6 kilometers away from the Russians' initial starting point. Kind of interesting. But yeah, if you enjoy the opium dust, you sniff it, because Myrne has potential if Ukraine can push in troops to exploit it. And remember, they did deploy a lot of heavy-duty units to deal with the Russian breakthrough operation. So there are capable Ukrainian units in the area that you can move around to fill this gap and exploit the situation and maybe begin operations behind Russian lines and within Russian lines. So yeah, really interesting. Really, imagine if they take all the heavy hitters from up here and have moved them here, and they were responsible for this push, and they are in Myrne. Maybe they can push onward. Like I said, a few kilometers north into Kopcheve, and then if the Russians want to move through units and logistics to support the front line over here, it's a narrow gap here, but it's a wide open field, right? And the Russians will be torn to shreds. The problem is, of course, you need units to hold the gap open so the Russians don't counterattack and close the gap at Myrne or somewhere else, for instance, right? But still, it's an interesting potential, and like I said, the threat level of Ukraine being in Myrne and having the potential of doing all of this, I'm assuming Russia will just sending a lot of troops to close this down before it snowballs out of control, right? But interesting, really interesting. And I mean, take a look at Novekonomice, which is probably the most likely event here. If anything's going to happen. Ukraine is in Myrne, they secure Myrne, and as you can see, you have the river coming down here. Russia doesn't have all that many options in helping out Novekonomice. You have a road here, right? But the Ukrainians are right next to it. So the road leads down between the river and the Ukrainians. Ukraine has cut the logistics, the main logistical line, and Novoekonomice. There's potential here for the Ukrainians to exploit this and pushing in and causing damage to Russians in this town. Oh, most definitely. And that's it. It's going to be an interesting week. How will Russia deal with Myrne? Can Ukraine keep pushing back at these various positions along the front line? Will Ukraine have more success up at Sumy Oblast? Will Russia move in more troops to Rodinsk and Shakova? What's going to happen this week? It's going to be interesting, is my guess. Anyway, that's going to have to be it. I hope I'll see you in the next one. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.